Hey man.
Hey, Chris. It's nice to see your face,
So it's nice to see your face.
albeit
Uh, we're
slightly pixelated.
is it?
Slightly.
We are we are doing our fourth episode from long distance
Yes, indeed.
because of the coronavirus. It's
Yep.
COVID-19.
Fun times.
Um, sometimes. Although this time, before we were trying to doing this for phone. Now we're on like Facebook, video chat, something or
Yes.
other.
We're moving up in the world.
We are,
We're
and I'm
getting
trying a
closer to the
new.
21st century.
I think we might be a little late on that one then. At least I found how lacking of technical skills I really am as I'm searching my very cluttered office for my headphones.
Well, I completely failed to help you set up your technical situation, so we both are equally to blame.
Well, we're gonna do a mini-sode again.
Fun times.
Right, fun times.
Did we
We
decide
didn't
on
really
a
have
topic?
so we didn't really have a topic picked out, and so I was driving to a quick trip to the grocery store, pick up some hamburger buns for dinner, and I was like, you know what? I have just been reading. Okay, so a few months ago, I was reading a biography on George Lucas,
Yes.
by John Baxter
Uh-huh.
called Mythmaker, and it's an interesting book, very good. Highly recommend it. I need to get back to you, Ben, because that's
Well,
where I got it from.
there's no rush on that.
And then was also just more recently because of COVID-19, I've started listening to Star Wars Aftermath on audiobook,
Oh yeah.
which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is the first novel written after Disney takes over, right?
Yep.
If I recall correctly.
Mhm.
Which is interesting because I grew up reading and listening to all the old Star Wars books, now
Yeah.
called Legend. Um,
Now reduced in status.
it's no longer canon. Yeah, I
Very
was very,
sad.
very disappointed in that, actually. So I kind of stepped away from the whole Star Wars EU for a little while,
Mhm.
and have just started getting back, trying to catch up on where Star Wars is going now.
Right.
But I was noticing as I was listening to this new novel, some of the philosophical questions and debates that the author is discussing,
Yeah.
like the nature of war,
Uh-huh.
for example. And I found it interesting because George Lucas was also dealing with the aftermaths of America at war
Right.
when he is writing the original Star Wars.
Mhm.
So the connecting point here is that I've heard from a couple different sources about how Star Wars is kind of, in part anyway, an allegory about the Vietnam War. Not necessarily a anti-war book
Mhm.
or film in that case, but definitely has some overtones of imperialism and kind of where America might have been at that point.
Yeah.
And the same case is for in the book Aftermath. I was kind of catching some pretty preachy themes post Afghanistan, post Iraq kind of world
Yeah.
of kind of where we are as a society. So yeah, that is kind of my eureka moment for listening to these two different generations Star Wars stories.
Yeah.
Have you noticed these things in your own investigation of Star Wars?
I have particularly the Lucas Vietnam connection more so than in the latter day. I feel like the newer films try to play it safe compared to something like Aftermath, which I have read actually. I haven't read a lot of EU, but I have read that one.
Oh, really?
um,
Did you like it? I'm kind of like a quarter way through it right now.
I liked a lot of things about it. Certain characters I thought were intriguing. On the whole, it I mean, we can talk about it more once you've finished it. I don't want to spoil anything for you or for anyone listening who hasn't heard it or read it. Um, but yeah, it's definitely not a favorite, but I enjoyed it. Do you think, so drawing those parallels a little bit, do you think from a historical perspective that there's some analogies to be drawn between the Gulf Wars and the Vietnam War?
And when you say Gulf Wars, are you talking about the latest wars in the Middle East,
Well, talking
like
about
the
the
second
the wars in
Iraq War?
Iraq, first or second, or both.
You know, I've not read too much about those from like a historical sources.
Hmm.
I've only heard about, of course, watching mass media right now. You watch TV, you can see a lot of shows that have characters that are veterans of Afghanistan or veterans of Iraq.
Yeah.
And when you go back and watch 80s shows, like, for instance, Magnum PI,
Hmm.
they are Vietnam veterans.
Yep.
So there's correlation between that. Even if you watch, I don't know if you're familiar with a show called Sherlock.
Hmm.
They kind of do a similar thing in that British show with John Watson. Instead of being in the Afghan War in the beginning of the 20th century, he's in the Afghan War at the beginning
Yeah.
of the 21st century. I'm not sure any more examining motives in those wars or kind of
Yeah.
things like that. But other than, they definitely are interesting to kind of see used in media.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because on one level they're very different conflicts. A lot more people died in Vietnam, and there was a draft, which is, I guess, the biggest difference.
Right,
Um,
right.
but also, I feel like it kind of fit some of the political narrative for people to cast Bush as uh, trying to get us into another Vietnam. So to some extent, that's part of why they're depicted so similarly, because they're
Well,
kind of motivated differently.
I mean, they're very big, very very big differences.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Kind of go back to the 1970s. We just did our 1970s episode.
Yeah.
Um, Vietnam is kind of set. It's one of those events in American history that has kind of set how we look at the world. So you can kind of see some of these events in American history, like 9/11, definitely kind of projects the way we look at the 21st century as far
Hmm.
as safety and terror and how we act in a crisis.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Vietnam kind of did that for the latter part of the 20th century
Hmm.
in the way we deal with politics.
Yeah.
Watergate was another one of those. So whenever we talk about war, we're all automatically thinking about it's another quagmire. It's another
Yeah.
Vietnam. Even looking backwards towards the past of American history, we look at the Filipino, I don't know if you want to call it a war or an occupation or whatever. We kind of look at that, maybe call it the first Vietnam. And we
Right.
did talk about the Philippines a little bit in one of our earlier Questions by the Decade episode.
Hmm.
But you see what I'm saying is that we look at this event and we kind of paint it backwards. We also use it to project forwards. And so whenever we talk about war, we automatically think, is this another Vietnam?
Hmm.
You're not going to see anyone really say, this is another world war. This is another World War II, where
Right.
we kind of paint that in our minds as the greatest generation.
Hmm.
We kind of see it as a righteous war, whereas opposed to Vietnam, it got really dirty in the media
Yeah.
and in American minds.
Well, it's
So,
interesting the World War II aspect because of course there's a lot of World War II imagery in Star Wars. A lot of the uniforms and things are taken from the Nazis. There's a lot of imagery taken from Nazi propaganda films in terms of composition and editing techniques, and so it's a big hodgepodge in a lot of ways. There's a lot of Vietnam references, and I guess even in Aftermath there's some World War II kind of I don't know. It's almost more of a. I think because they changed the name from Rebellion to Resistance, they kind of wanted to promote more of the French resistance that they've
Yeah.
resistance movement that they've kind
Um,
of made a movie about recently.
Another possible reasoning for that kind of change in the newer movies would be we want to get away from our image of the American Civil War. So we don't want to be associated with rebels as much as we want to be, like you said, World War II resistance fighters.
Yeah.
Or freedom fighters, something like that nature.
Yeah. I know Rian Johnson was very influenced by World War II movies, and George Lucas, of course, cut together, and his editing team cut together a bunch of dogfight sequences from World War II movies to get some of the rhythm and pacing for starfighting sequences. So, war is a big part of Star Wars.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a spoiler for anyone who want to read the book Aftermath, but there is a segment in it where they talk about it's just all one war. That one war feeds into another war, and it's just the roles flip back and forth. Very kind of 1984-ish idea.
I'd say that's about a full episode.
That's a full minisode there.
That's one minisode for you folks.
We have not come to any solid conclusions, but it is interesting to kind of see how Star Wars has changed over 40 years.
Yeah.
From one generation to the next.
Tell us what you think. Tell us how you think Star Wars has changed from one generation. Do you think there's been a passing of the torch in terms of looking back on the Vietnam War or looking back on the war in Iraq? You can tweet us at PopStorian.
You can message us on Facebook.
We're on Instagram.
It's true. Instagram. We're on YouTube, and of course there's email.
popstorian@gmail.com.
Yeah. So give us a shout out.
Give us a ring. We'll be happy to pick up. And I guess that's it for this week, Chris.
I think so. I look forward to next week. Being overly optimistic, maybe we'll actually get to see each other face to face, and this whole coronavirus will just blow out to sea and never have to deal with it again.
That's an interesting idea. No. How would that even happen at this stage?
I was overly optimistic.
It blows out to sea.
It just blows out to sea. A storm just comes and washes it out.
Let's hope so.